basically, I try and stop my thought, my anxious thought or my fear thought. Not completely, it doesn't go away, but it's basically just like take a step back or two. And then it's not even that I, wait for it to go away. It's that I do something else.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast, where we are reimagining and redefining what it means to be in midlife, where we are gathering energy, momentum, and excitement for our next chapter via candid conversations with other midlifers about their own pivots, pitfalls, and triumphs. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest because her story is such a great example of resilience and ingenuity in the face of uncertainty. It's likely that at some point we've all faced challenges to our livelihood. It could come in the form of a layoff, a health diagnosis, or an economic downturn that catches us in its trap. It's how we respond to that challenge that defines us. Today, I'm talking to Michelle Widmeier. She's a chiropractor and acupuncturist who's been studying and working in the field of holistic medicine for over 20 years. She wasn't always in the field of wellness, so that's the first part of her story. The COVID shutdown was, of course, a massive roadblock for her private practice. Her response to the shutdown is what I find fascinating, and I hope you will too. She chose to entirely rethink her business and reinvented it with the new name, Ground Control Wellness. I love that name. She created a mobile chiropractic acupuncture and wellness clinic designed to respond to her current and new patient base in the midst of the COVID-19 shutdown. What does that mean? It means she bought a van and outfitted it for the safe treatment of her patients. Isn't that cool? I can't wait for you to meet her and hear how she did it. But before we do, I want to remind you that I created a free guide for you designed to help you start taking the next steps towards your next act. It's a workbook called 5 Steps to Your Midlife Reboot. You can sign up to receive it as an email series with some practical exercises you can use over the course of several weeks to get past feeling stuck. You can do these at your own pace, as they'll be waiting for you in your inbox when you're ready for the next step. I'll remind you at the end of the episode and tell you where to sign up if you're interested. Okay, without further ado, here's Michelle Widmeier. Let's go. Hey, Michelle, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi. Thanks, Yvonne. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I'm so excited. So I always like to say how I met people, and you and I were introduced by Miss Amy Allen, my buddy. She sent me an email one day and said, "Hey, I was thinking about your podcast, and my chiropractor has this really cool thing she's doing. Would you be interested?" And I was like, "Yes, I would." Super cool. So, after talking to you, was definitely intrigued by your story and the pivoting that you've been doing throughout your life and career, really. I mean, I guess kind of going back to your 30s, right? When you went back to
20s, 30s. Yeah.
When did you go back to become a chiropractor? Because I know you were working.
Oh, I went back to school. Yeah, it was in my 30s. Yep.
In your 30s?
I was working corporate, fashion corporate. And I left there and did a few things in between, and was mostly directing myself to go back to school. Yeah.
Gotcha. What were the in-between things? I always kind of like to hear the in-between stories.
When I was working at Ralph Lauren in their design studios in Manhattan, and through a friend that I was working with, she introduced me to this woman named Yamina Zake. And she was a healer, a body worker. She still is. She's in New York City, and introduced me to her. And because I had injuries, I was a cyclist. I was a competitive cyclist. And, she said, go see her. She's going to help you with these injuries. And it was just one of those moments. I mean, I've always lived my life holistically and had a lot of interest, just, side gigs, so to speak, of just things I was interested in, especially about my own health.
Mm-hmm.
And I was an athlete. And so I went to see her, and she did some work on me. And I was, I walked away from that situation and then went back and, kept going like, wow, this is really interesting. Like I was really drawn to this person as a healer, as now a teacher. And just out of my own being interested in health and that I was a cyclist, I wanted to learn more. And so she did these trainings, and it was just a click. And so I started doing her trainings. I'm still working at Ralph Lauren. And it was something that just was a strong pivot for me. And it got to the point where she wanted me to work with her. I'm like, well, I have my day job. And so,
right.
So it was, and there were some other life things in there too that helped me with that decision. But it was, basically a moment where I just said, well, is this the work I want to do, or is this the work I want to do? And so I made that really challenging leap from good paying job, health insurance, especially back there in the 90s when your health insurance was like paid for everything, and no co-pays, no deductibles, and dental, and
wow,
so
that's another world, right? But yeah, so you were going from safety and surety, right? And a little bit of predictability, and then
that's
into
right, to like this, huge unknown of, apprenticing with my teacher. And so it was a big deal. And then there's lots of details in there, but there was another thing that drew me to California. And so I moved to California for like a second, and then I moved back, and then I moved back again. And so while I was working with Yamana, I also realized like I love doing this work. I love everything about it. It was like, this is kind of my thing. But I also started feeling like I needed more information. Like I started feeling as if I would be presented with something that I didn't have all the answers to, because I didn't know enough about anatomy, physiology, all those things. Yeah. So I started looking at, well, I want that. So how do I get more education? So I was actually going to go to med school, but at that point, wow, I was, it was more like it would be another 10 years.
Yes, a lot of money. That would be a huge
because of my
commitment.
age. And also, and then I had a friend who was a chiropractor, and she, and so I started spending time with her and talking to her about it. And I'm like, this sounds more like me. This sounds more like, holistic. And, I'll have to go back to school and do some pre-med. And then it's, 4 years after that. And it's going to be a lot of money, but let me just start it. And so that's what I did. And I did all kinds of scrappy little jobs to put myself through school.
As you do,
and,
right?
Big fat student loans for graduate school, that's for sure. And and then, graduated. And because I was an older graduate student at that point, I was 37. I had that maturity, and I'm a good student anyway. And so I developed relationships with, my professors. And because I knew I was going to graduate from school and I needed to make some money somehow, I did a lot of different things, like right at the beginning. And one of them was, as soon as I left, I walked into my dean's office and said, here's my application, give me a job. Because
for you, oh my gosh, I love that.
Me. And he said, can you be in practice for about a year first, at least? It's like, we trust what you're doing. And I'm like, okay, I'll go do that for you. And then I was back in a year. I'm like, give me a job. And
where
so
did you go to?
So
hold on, I'm going to back you up. Where did you go to school? And when you said you left to move to California for a hot minute, you were living in New York.
I was living in New York. Yeah.
So I
was living in New York when I got to I moved to San Diego when I got there. It's just like so many, I'm just that personality. Like I'm going to figure it out. So I was able to do my undergrad there. So that's what I did.
Okay.
And, did a million other things
in San Diego.
Pay the bills in San Diego.
Did that.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I was very fortunate. I got like, grants and things like that. And I always had the intention of coming back. I almost stayed in California just based on where the chiropractic schools were. So there's one in LA, there's one in San Francisco, but there was another pull back to the East Coast. So that's why I went to University of Bridgeport, which is their chiropractic program there. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then you finished school, you opened your own practice for a little bit, and then you went back to them and said, okay, now hire me.
Yeah. Yeah. I opened my own practice. I covered practices. I was still working part-time when I used to live in Sleepy Hollow, New York. So further down, with a chiropractor there, basically assisting. I worked at the Burke Rehab Hospital, like just doing body work and trying to get a chiropractic program in there. And that was I had all kinds of advisors around it. That didn't work. So I just tried on a lot of different things. Meanwhile, I was also building my practice, basically like hang the shingle and sit there and like, nobody's coming. But I was able to set up all my systems, build a website, and do all these things while I'm waiting and doing other things to make money.
So, yeah, it's funny when you're trying to build a business, and you want it to go, you've got goals, right? And you're thinking,
totally.
Okay, I'm going to hang my shingle and they're going to come, and it doesn't happen like that, right? So, but there's almost, I don't know if you would agree, but there's almost a blessing in a slow build, because as you said, you were building your systems and that gave you time to do that. Do you think that was beneficial for you?
That was absolutely beneficial. And it's because of my practice today is solid. Even though we're in a pandemic, it's my practice is referral based. It's always been referral based. It's strong referrals. It's like just runs itself. I'm just waiting for people to come out of the house right now. And that was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. That was also like, I guess, luck. Like the person I would meet that would come in and love what I did and go, and they happen to be like a big connector to a lot of other people. And so I had that. And then and also just with my credentialing, I met someone right at the beginning of my practice who brought me into the New Haven Open, which was the pilot pen, which is basically the WTA, the tennis tournament in New Haven, Connecticut. That's a week before the US Open. So I was there for 9 years. She was referred to me, and I said to her, like, can I work with the professional tennis players? And she said, let me get you in touch with the person you need to talk to. And they said yes. So, the next 9 years, every time that tournament was going on, I was up there. And so that also gave me, like, I was working with these amazing physiotherapists, and, they're people that travel with them, and then offering what I did. I just lost something like that. That's okay.
Yeah.
So that was another, like, a gift, because it also lended to, now I can say that, like, I worked with professional tennis players for 9 years.
Yeah.
And that tournament is now closed, unfortunately, because they lost funding. And when it became a women's only tournament, that was the sad part about that.
Really?
Had trouble keeping it.
Huh. Wow.
So
you worked with these professional athletes. What did that lead you to with these?
I think that just led me to, first of all, the experience of that. And when I would see people who were athletes, like it didn't give me a stream of patients per se. It gave me credentials. It gave me, that next level of professional experience that I could, that helps people feel more confident in seeing me, as opposed to someone else. So, and for me, just professionally, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and it was great. It was great.
Yeah. And when you get to
And
work on a level like that, it
mm,
gives you, besides the credentialing, that where other people can then, that little stamp of approval that looks good to other people. I
yeah,
imagine it brought up your level of confidence as well in your own
yeah,
abilities
yeah,
and what the
yeah.
level
And
that
that
you were
took a
playing
while
at.
too. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why they call it a practice. You
Mhm.
graduate school and now you get to go practice, meaning you get to get better. You're going to screw up sometimes and you just keep practicing. So all these things gave me more teaching, and then working with the WTA, working at the tennis tournament. So all those things were part of my practice being strengthened, and just giving me more credentials, I guess, or just, and more confidence. Teaching, I think, did most of that. You're better at what you do if you teach it. I mean, everybody says that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that was all. I mean, I'm still teaching, just it's a little different right now, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So you've been in practice now for how long has it been then?
12 years.
12
12
years?
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so were there any pivots that before COVID, or was COVID kind of the big?
I think COVID was definitely the big.
I mean, I know that that's what's
The
led you
COVID
to the new
was,
business model, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
I would not have done this. In fact, I remember saying to some people a couple years ago, because I'm really grateful that I landed into a successful practice that just kind of ran itself. And I used to say, and just the way I was practicing, I was going into corporate offices. I was invited in. That was another connection. It was like, can you come to us? We'll give you a space, and schedule. So I was given that invitation as well, as so
Kind of the
I
on-site
think
person for their
on-site
employees, right?
person.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was a really great thing for my practice. And guess what? My revenue. And I was saying I said a few times over the last few years, I'm like, I'm in this like really nice work bubble. Like I'm making a really good revenue, yay for me. And it's working really well. I'm not really working that hard. I'm traveling. Like all of a sudden I felt like an adult in my life. Like, look at this.
I'm hoping to get there
And
someday.
I know. And I'm like, wow. But then there was a part of me that's like, this is a nice bubble. I'm going to really appreciate this, because I feel like there's factors that could change, and then this is all gone. And then COVID hit. And I'm like, well, at least there was a part of me that was like, well, I kind of like, had a sense of this, like
Oh, I'm
something. And here's the
so
something.
glad
It's
that
a
you
big
took the
something.
time to appreciate that. That's
Yeah.
incredible that you were able
Yeah.
to tap into recognizing the
Yeah.
good place that you were in, because it's 50-50
Yeah.
for all of us, right? Or
That's right. That's
maybe.
right.
You
I
know,
can't say I was prepared for it though.
even so, right?
In a way of like, I don't think nobody was prepared for this. Nobody
No,
was prepared for
no.
this. So,
So
yeah.
when we were talking earlier, you live in New York, but your practice
Yeah.
was primarily in Westport, Connecticut, right? Because you
Connecticut.
lived in
Hmm.
Connecticut for a little bit, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so here you are, you're living in New York, COVID happens. So
I
paint a
know.
picture for us about what happened to your practice and where your head went with that.
Right. So COVID happened, and because there was state mandates of shutting down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my practice, and because I was going into corporate office, so the first stage for me was I'm going into corporate offices 3 days a week. And the very beginning of March, they sent everybody home.
Mm-hmm.
And literally overnight, my schedule went from full to not full. And then the next couple weeks into March, I still had my office in Westport, where other people who weren't part of this, stream of patients were still coming to see me. But then it started becoming more clear about what was now happening. And then so this was maybe second week in March. And then I was renting a space that, excuse me, that was shared. And the owner of the building decided that they were going to cut their losses also and permanently close down the building. So April 1st, I was without shut down like everybody. If you're in the service industry, if you were having one-on-one, if you weren't treating emergency people, like, that if it was an emergency only, then you weren't working. So I was shut down, but now my building was shutting down. And so, and I've moved before in Westport, so it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. Like, I was like, well, I can't see anybody right now anyway. Let me just start to think about where I'll grab another space in Westport. That wasn't going to be a big deal for me. It was just more the timing. Like, back in April, we're like, yeah, this will be over in June.
Yeah. And I am going to toss in for people who don't live in this tri-state area, little bubble that we're in. Westport is next door to the town I live in, which is about an hour from New York City by train or by car, really. Right. So, but you're living in New York and you'd have to cross the state line to come and work here. Right. So, and New York was heavily shut down.
Yeah, there was that where I was paying attention to, them suddenly like closing things down and whether you can move back and forth. But I always had, because I'm a provider, I always had the status of that I could, I wasn't like, I was in the essential worker group essentially, right? So I was still going to be able to move back and forth. So I could have seen patients. As an essential worker, because that was what I was given at the very beginning, you're an essential worker, you can still work. But the still work was very clear. The still work was in an emergency. Like if you have to, like if you need, and so I wasn't going to put myself or my patients in that. Like it was really clear. Like I had to have like a sit down with myself. I'm like, okay, no, I'm shut down until we know what this is. I'm not seeing patients. I had people still, like 3 or 4 weeks into it. It's like, do you have any office hours right now? I'm like, no, we're in a pandemic.
Oh my goodness.
So,
here's a question for you. Like I used to go see a chiropractor, not on a regular basis, but I have a bad back that can go out every now and again. And man, when it goes out, it feels like an emergency, I gotta say.
I know.
So did you have people calling you and saying, Michelle, I'm in incredible pain, like, and you've got to like,
I mean, there's telemedicine and, I never billed for a telemedicine, but it's like, so you have to think about like the nature of my practice is very strongly referral based and what I say, very family oriented. Like I've been seeing groups of people for 12 years. I mean, their baby's born, their kids grow up. So for me, and just who I am, I guess, and not to have any arrogance around that, is like, if people called me, I just spent time on the phone. I mean, mostly if I was speaking to patients and trying to guide them through whatever's going on and give them advice or just help them with information. I'm a little bit of a nerd around science and information. So, help them navigate also, and myself, so there was some of that. I think, mostly people just kind of dealt with it. Like everybody else had that same experience of, okay, my back's okay. I mean, you could say the same thing about people who needed other kinds of medical care. I'll wait. Dental work, I'll wait, let's just wait. So, and we're going to see the results of that down the road too. All the regular visits, whether emergency or not, that people waited on, hopefully we'll all be okay. But, people didn't do a lot of things because they were just, I'll deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
pop a couple Advil and do the best they could.
Have you
Call me and I'll tell them like, okay, well, we've had this conversation before, so we'll just tell you again. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. This is, so.
So then you had like a little stroke of genius, I would say, right? And
yeah, when I realized opening up an office was not going to solve my problem of now the people who were in these corporate offices, which was a big chunk of my practice, are now home. And home is everywhere. Home was even New York City. So I wasn't going to catch those people, but everybody else who's all over the lower Fairfield County and would drive to their corporate office in Westport, they're now all over. So I thought, well, a office will keep my local people, but I'm not going to get all those other people. It's part of a drive. Or it's just, it's going to complicate things. So a friend of mine in Rowayton, she was talking to me about her vet, and she mentioned like a few months before, she's like, oh yeah, she comes in a mobile office, and she's even done surgery on my dog in her mobile office. Like I was like, what, really? And so that was the thing, that was the seed. I was like, well, if a vet can do surgery in a van, so then it was research, and I was just like, okay, how would this work? And like everything just started churning, and I started doing research. Who else is doing it? How are they doing it? What kind of vehicles? How do I get a vehicle? How do I build a vehicle? What do I need in it? Like all these things. And I just, I was standing in front of my computer for days and days and days. And then it was like, and how do I get the money to do that? Like, there's just all these things.
Right.
How do I make it safe? Mm-hmm. And that was really there was two things. One, that was now going to be mobile, and I can go get to some of these people. And I can also help with that people are afraid to leave their homes, right? That they're still right now struggling with that. And then the second part was me being able to completely control the environment. So now we're talking about COVID safety. I have a HEPA filter installed and circulating air, open the doors, it's all cleaned out. Like I'm controlling the environment and keeping it safe. And I did a lot of research around that. And then set it up. So there was that. There was like, here's your safe space. I mean, for me, a lot of my patients that I've seen through this time, they tell me it's like, you're the only other thing we're doing. Like we're inside and we're seeing you. And that just also speaks to like what most importantly is, that I've kept a communication and trust with my patients.
Yeah.
So, those that they trusted me that I would say like this, and this, and this is what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to do it. And, aside from maybe they run to the grocery store once every 2 weeks, they were seeing me. So, wow. And even that but it was like a brand new practice. I mean, it was like a brand new thing. Like everything about my practice, I had to think about it differently. And so, and it wasn't like I just drove up my van and said, here I am. And then everyone piled in. That took a while. I felt like at the beginning again, how do I tell people? How do I show this off, or how
do you communicate that the safe protocols that you're using, the process, like I show up at such a, how do we set this up? How do you set up each appointment? It's all different, right?
It was all different. Yeah. And I think one of the things that, because of how I built my practice was something that I still relied on. And that was the few people that I saw at the very beginning in my mobile office. I said, go tell your people, like, go spread the word. And that, because also I made a decision that at the beginning, I wasn't going to see new patients yet. Like I needed time to just get used to it myself
Mm-hmm.
and learn about this whole new dynamic. And also, know that I'm dealing with someone who's also, I'm saying like, come try this out, this new thing, So to do that with somebody new, I wasn't ready for it. Like to do that with somebody who I'd been treating for 12 years, they were like, cool, we're all in, So it was like months before I said, and even still I'm referral only, like I'm not good with a cold call. I wish I was, but I'm really not.
Right. But clearly you don't need it. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing thing to be on referral only. That's so great. And you had the trust level that you'd built up with those people, that relationship, and again, the slow build into your new processes, right? So I'm just amazed at that pivot and really all your pivots. Do you, as you said just a little bit ago, you said I'm just somebody who digs in and figures things out. What were the fears that you had going into this? I imagine it must have been a little scary.
It was a lot. I mean, I'm not going to say that I was just like in this creative bubble. I was in like one moment of like, this is ridiculous. Like this is not going to work. And then just, but not just feeling that fear. I mean, I think fear is in everything, the fear of failure, yes, I have a fear of failure, but I have failed before. So I have a fear of failure, but if I fail, it's, if it doesn't work, I know what that feels like because it's happened before. So it's okay. It doesn't, who says they're not afraid of failure? Everybody's afraid of failure, but you do it anyway. It's, you know what I mean? Like you just, so yes, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of doubt. There was a lot of anxiety around, what if I, it's like what was it? The movie, if I build it and they will come, what if they don't?
Right. Right.
What if I roll up with this very expensive piece of equipment and they don't? I mean, that was a real thing.
So I'm gonna take you to a little space. I want you to kind of, I want to know when you face those moments of fear, when you're up against it, and however that feels for you, if it's like you've got your face pressed up against a wall or a weight on your chest. What's the first thing you do when you get that feeling of I can't do this, or I don't know how this is going to work, or just overwhelm?
I breathe. I take a deep breath. And, because of just my personality, I also have a lot of practices in my life, and that's to help myself manage those types of things. So whether it's breathing, pausing, and just sort of tap it, just to acknowledge it. Like that's what I found most helpful, because I've been in places in my life where not acknowledging it, and it becomes just all the narrative in my head about the things that could or couldn't happen. But basically I try and stop my thought, my anxious thought or my fear thought. Not completely, it doesn't go away, but it's basically just like take a step back or two. And then it's not even that I, wait for it to go away. It's that I do something else. I never really thought about this actually, but it's there, it doesn't go away. Like I feel like, but then I go do something else. It's like, and then I start to read something else, or then if I have an idea, I kind of go with it, or I write it down, or I just keep playing with things. And the whole time I'm afraid, pretty much. I can say like the whole time there's been like this underlying like, but it's not overwhelming because I'm doing all these other things that for me it's also it's my curiosity. So I'm also like, hey, let me see if let me try this, let me do this, let me, you know, and I have notes and notes and notes of things that at the beginning of this I had ideas about, and nothing's happened with it because it wasn't a good idea. It was like, a concept or a way of doing something. I was like, no, that hasn't how, it's like that. I don't know. It sounds a little, chaotic, but
No, it doesn't sound chaotic at all to me. I mean, I think it's clear the idea of pausing, and it's always the first thing that that I think is that when we're run by that voice of whether it's fear, self-criticism, all the limiting thoughts, right? The first step is to get aware of them, right? Because if you don't even realize they're back there running you, then it's just they're back
then
there
they're running you.
You got no chance of
Exactly.
stopping that, right?
That's right.
But I love the idea of you just acknowledging it and not feeling like it has to go away, but letting it be there, and then finding your next, it sounds like baby step, like whatever your next step is, let me just try this small step, would you say? To okay,
or idea or something that kind of sparks something, or it's a light bulb, and then some of that fear subsides because now I'm going more towards like this is going to work, and then so it's a wave. And I do feel like there's so the expectation is that you get rid of fear or your anxiety, and I don't think most of us do. You find a way to work with it, and there is a motivate, there is something. I mean, there's a useful part of fear. I think if that fear makes me find another way, because I don't want to stay feeling that way. So it's actually a little bit of a motivator to get out of that discomfort and try and find a solution. I think if I was just always comfortable, I don't know, would I do this? Would I have done this if I was, if I wasn't pushed to like
like that little
like
piece of sand in the oyster, right? It's like that little
rub,
right? Just that little thing rubbing again up against you, making things uncomfortable, makes you move and do things. Do you think that that the age you're at and that being in midlife, has that been something that you feel has served you in making this pivot? Has it been something that made it more of a challenge in any way? Which way, or both? Could it be, yes and?
A challenge, just because I feel like I need more sleep these days. I feel like, can I just rest yet? There's that. So there's and I don't know if that's a challenge. That's just like,
well, I think it is. I think just physically, as we get older, I think, it's physically harder to keep up. I, as a photographer, I go and do, much like you, I'll go into businesses and I've got all my gear, and and I got to take it with me, and it's heavy and it's a lot, or I'm doing family photos in the park, and I'm running around with these little munchkins and telling them to throw leaves at me, or, let's play chase or whatever it is we're doing. And, as I get older and older, it's like, whew, by the end of a full day.
Just be still. I'm going to take a chase. I'm going to go.
Just smile, stand over there. I'll take a picture.
Just smile.
But
I totally get it.
Just the physical challenge of keeping a schedule that you need to make that big change, right? Do you feel like there's any way in which it helped you?
Because yes, absolutely. I mean, just being older, and I'm so grateful. I'm 53, so I feel like around like 50 is there was some sort of click off, and the click off was, I'm not so invested in what everybody thinks about me. Like I wasn't, I mean, I can say a few words, that will be bleeped about that, but
I don't bleep words. Go for it.
I don't give and so in that I was, and I've been very aware of that actually through all this, that's not there as much. It's there a little bit.
Right. It doesn't just
but
go
it's
away,
not
right?
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't go away. But it's not there as much. Like there's like a groundedness I feel that is, I talk to some of my younger friends, and I don't know what happens, but women in my peer group say the same thing. There's just like something that happens that you just, and what a relief, really, when I'm trying to do something like this,
Yeah.
that I think it's allowed for me to, since I don't have all that background noise or extra narratives or judgments or concerns, I have all this other expansive space to do other things. And yeah, I mean, it's clear to me, it's been clear to me as a younger person of that being really important, what other people think.
Of needing to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Needing to prove myself, and, feeling like, it's the American way too. It's like how you're valued, as a productive human being. I don't know. But
boy, we really do tie it into that, don't we? The productivity, how much do you make? All that stuff is so tied into our American value system for how we value life. How do you value a person's, a life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, this pandemic, it's going to absolutely reveal a lot of those kind of questions, values for a lot of people, just based on that suddenly so many things are no longer about, how you're showing up to your office. It's interesting. And, now you're spending your time differently. And there's going to be positives, and then there's going to be a lot of really tough things that are going to have to be, it's going to take a long time to help people through. But I think, I guess I've learned a lot, thank goodness.
Yeah, I do think it's the blessing of what
Mm-hmm.
this pandemic has been, is the chance for all of us to slow down and really look at our values, almost be forced to look at our values this year, all year, so many levels. So I have one more quick question for you. Do you think that your background as a competitive cyclist has been a big part of you being able to pivot?
Yeah, because that tells you a bit about my personality, and that if I find something I love and I'm good at, I'm like all in. And that's in relationship, that's in, that's in my work, that's in things that I become passionate about. And if I'm not, it's really hard to get my attention.
Yeah.
So
did you feel like when you were in the corporate world, you were with Ralph Lauren, you were doing what you were doing then, was there any sense that you were aware of where there was that little piece of sand that was uncomfortable and rubbing against you? Or did you just, you happened upon this thing that helped you, and then you got interested in it, and then you just followed that path because you became all in. Like, was there any kind of discomfort that led you to find the new passion?
Yeah. I've always had that discomfort. I've always had that sand. And so as a younger person, I was always seeking. So whether that was through therapy or 12 step or yoga or meditation, or I mean, I used to joke that I knew all the books in the self-help section of, the Strand back
Girl,
then,
I've
or
spent a
Barnes
lot
and
of time in
Noble.
that section.
So, Course in Miracles, like all of it. Like, so, I've always been that person. And so at Ralph Lauren, I was that person too. I feel like, Ralph Lauren was a great experience because I was young. I was 26 when I started working there. And again, it was, sometimes I look back and I'm like, why did they give me a job? But I feel like I grew up there, and I feel like just the nature of what I did there also allowed for me to do all this other stuff that was just part of me finding my way and being a little bit of a train wreck too at points, just emotionally, because I was such a strong, like, I need more information. I was uncomfortable a lot. I'm someone who is uncomfortable a lot in my skin, but not debilitated by it. Like I'll go, so that's why I'm someone who's seeking. Like I'm someone who's not trying to find the solution, but trying to understand. I consider myself someone who practices self-inquiry, and as I got older, that has changed too. And I think that's part of like some of where something has changed, where it's not about the information that I'm trying to get to bring in to learn and that will give me insight. It's more like there's something about that, it's kind of already here. I just have to clear the way. And like, and so that what's already here is something that is why I've always been the person I've been, seeking, like from a teenager. I've been someone who's been interested in this sort of self-inquiry. So that's been something interesting the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Last couple of years.
Wow.
Where I'm like, okay, it's not like the next book that I read, or, you should see my podcast list and my, Audible. And like, it's just, I'm an information person, like just, because I love learning.
Put it in my
and I
veins,
love learning
man.
about like, why do I feel like a freak? Let me learn about why I feel like a freak. So, and I mean that in a loving way,
Yeah.
And I feel like some of that has fallen away. Like it's already here. Like, of course it is, because I'm here and I'm all right. Like
we all have it inside of us, right? And we just don't. I mean, it's just really is about trying to tap into what's already there for all of us.
What's already there.
Yeah.
But you have to clear away all the
I was talking to somebody earlier this week who was talking about the normalization of crisis. And so it makes me think of that sand, that uncomfortable thing where where we have the discomfort or the crisis, if you want to call it, and then that then informs us and sets us on a new path where we can then go out in the world and give something to somebody else, which you've done.
I think, if you're someone who is feeling that and recognizes that, absolutely have to do it. I mean, most of, I talk about how my practice has changed, and, what I'm hearing, a lot of what I'm doing with people right now is just helping them through this, like, big discomfort, and not people, and there's no fault of their own. There's just some people who have never been so uncomfortable and they don't know what to do with themselves. They don't know how to manage it. They don't know what it means. They think it's like the end of the world. They don't believe it'll pass. Like they're just so uncomfortable, and and trying to find the words to help someone who doesn't have a language, hasn't spent their life, trying to understand, the workings of just everything.
Being human, right?
Just being human. And they're a mess. They're, people, and that's where, I think, and that's what I'm really paying attention to. I'm just like, okay, this is what's next. I don't know how long it's going to be going on, but, and it's like every day, if it's a COVID scare, we've been exposed, like we're all home and everybody's like freaking out. It's like these like constant waves, people losing their jobs and having been never thought that would ever happen to them. And, and then, I'm also seeing people I am seeing people for, all the pain in their body right now, because there's so much stress in their body. Like they don't know those connections. They're just like, my back won't stop hurting. There's nothing wrong with their back, right? They're just so stressed out. That's the place that talks the most right now. It is their vulnerable place. And that's, it's that, and finding that language to help someone, how do I help this person just feel okay for the moment, And I think, there's so many articles out there. And one of them I read recently was about the best thing we can do right now is just to really lower our expectations, like not feel like you're suddenly going to be inspired to write a book or, have a great pivot story. It's just like, get through the day, and pay attention to the people around you that are struggling right now. A lot of people are struggling right now. Yeah. So, man, I'm fortunate that I feel fortunate. I'm not where I was last year, but that's okay. Pay my bills,
Yeah. Getting by, right?
And, I'm still excited about what will come, what this will be. I may decide in the year to, go back into an office and do both, or, who knows, stay with this.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we'll have to touch base again in another bit of time somewhere down the road and see where this all leads you. It's very cool.
Good conversation.
Cool. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. And I'm going to have to send Amy a little thank you email for introducing
I love
us.
Amy. I've known her for at least 12, maybe even 13 or 14 years.
Wow. Yeah.
She's kind of like popped in and out of my life and popped in and out of my practice. And she just did recently and then gave me you. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Such an amazing person.
Yeah. So I'll close it out by saying, thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
So great. Well, there you have it. I am so inspired by Michelle's determination and ingenuity, and I'm thinking we can all take a page from her playbook. Looking back at what she did, I'm seeing the following steps. Stop, reflect, assess the current situation, imagine alternative approaches to the problem, and when you think you have a solution, start taking action and adjust as you go. Did I miss anything? I'd love to hear from you. If you want to know more about Michelle, I'll have that information for you in the show notes. You can just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and click on the show notes for episode 49. And while you're there, you can also find a link to the sign-up sheet for your free guide, 5 Steps to Your Midlife Reboot. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you have a fantastic week. Stay safe and well, and talk soon.